Are you looking for inspiration on a daily basis? Then check out Deal to Heal Teas. With our inspirational teas, you're sure to find something to inspire you. That's dealtohealteas.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.com. Again, that's dealtohealteas.com. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you'll enjoy the Girl Dad Discussion podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe the relationship between a daughter and her father is one of the most important relationships a young lady can have. And therefore, my mission is to promote the daddy-daughter relationship by sharing the voices of girl dads to the world. So check out our podcast on every platform where podcasts can be listened to. And if you want to watch the podcast, check us out on our YouTube channel. Again, that's the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with your host, Ernest James. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Ernest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to listen, like, subscribe, and share to our podcast on all of your social media platforms. And I want to say, make sure you guys check us out on our new podcasting YouTube channel on YouTube, our new podcasting channel on YouTube, which is called the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. It formerly was the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, but now we're giving you multiple podcasts and not just one. And so we turned our page into a podcasting network page. So again, check us out on our YouTube channel at the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network, where you'll be able to find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, as well as the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. On the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, I have a conversation with other girl dads and sometimes daughters as well to talk about the relationship, the daddy-daughter relationship, in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughter. You don't want to miss it. We have awesome guests on there, awesome fathers, and like I said, even sometimes awesome daughters sharing their experiences with the daddy-daughter relationship. So make sure you guys go there in order to check out that podcast, as well as listening to it, on your podcasting channels. Also, our product of the week, as you guys know, we are a self-sustained podcast, and the way that we keep ourselves on the air is by bringing you amazing products for you to purchase, right? And so our product of the week is our Purpose Journal and our Purpose Planner, because I believe we ought to journal in order to see and keep track of where we've been in our lives and where we are, as well as plan for our future. So make sure you guys go to the description. The links are in the description. Whether you're listening to this on a podcast platform or on YouTube, the links will be in the description, so you can check that out. Our product of the week, our Purpose Journal, and our Purpose Planner. So make sure you guys go check that out. All right. So today, just like any other day, we are blessed with the guest, Mr. Jon. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Ernest. How are you?
I am good, man. I am good. First of all, let me say thank you for being here because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, but you're here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate it. So we're gonna jump right in on it, John. Do me a favor,
Mhm.
introduce yourself to my listeners, and tell us a
Sure,
little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
sure. So first of all, thank you very much for having me, Ernest. It's just a pleasure and a privilege
Mm-hmm.
to be with you tonight. My name is Jonathan Slifka. I am a person with a disability, a wheelchair user, living in West Hartford, Connecticut. I am also an aspiring inspirational and motivational speaker. I am a trailblazer in many ways here in town. I was the first to do many things in the town that I grew up in, which has been an honor, as well as some additional experiences with that as well. But that's a little bit of an introduction with me. I don't know how far you want me to get into that because I know you've got a lot of questions,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but that's how you and I got connected.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll definitely get more into your story.
Hmm.
But yeah, we got connected through a speaking program,
Right,
right? And so definitely was intrigued by your story, just in us meeting on Zoom first, with
right.
everyone else, and learning that you are more a motivational speaker, but also being a person who uses a wheelchair,
Hmm.
and, and for whatever reason, and I don't know that I'm sure there's a reason for everything, right? But
Hmm.
in my life, I've been connected to persons in wheelchairs at different stages of my life, right? And
Hmm.
not really even recognizing it as something being different until I was an adult, right? So I remember in my earliest memory, one of my great friends who lives, my neighbors actually lives right next door to us. His father was in a car accident, which put him in a wheelchair. And
Hmm.
so, knowing him before and then after he was in the wheelchair and seeing how that dynamic changed, his family and even how we related to them,
Hmm.
as children, because now, the sons and the mom is helping, move the dad around and making sure he's can do different things. And then
Right.
number one, watching that, but then also being a part of it because we were friends. So I was around and I would help when I could. And then I remember a couple years after that, one of my mom's great friends moved back to town, and I didn't know him before. So I don't think he was in a wheelchair his whole life. But I remember when I did meet him, he was
Hmm.
in a wheelchair at that time. And so, got to know him and became friends with him and related to him. And then, as I mentioned to you before, the last 10 years I've been a caregiver to
Right.
two brothers, twin brothers, who both were in wheelchairs. And so I've always been connected. I don't know why, it just kind of happened that way, but I've
Hmm.
always been connected, to people in some way, that was connected with the disability where they have to use a wheelchair. And
Hmm.
so, that being said, when I'm able to talk to someone who's very passionate, even in the state of being in a wheelchair, but don't let that hold them back from doing such great things that they're able to accomplish. I know
Hmm.
one thing we mentioned about, excuse me, a previous guest that I had on, which is Fletcher Cleaves. And to my listeners, definitely go back and check out his episode that I had him on, which he's doing all kind of things and going all kind of places, you know. And so when we met and getting to know you, I was definitely interested in, again, the things that you've been able to accomplish in
Hmm.
your lifetime, being the first of many, things to accomplish from your perspective. And so, tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about, your earlier days before you even got to becoming a speaker to really
Hmm.
share your story to everyone else. Which probably to you is just like, okay, just a normal everyday thing, to be able to, yet still being a trailblazer, but just like, it's just John, what I'm
Right,
saying?
right. No, and I appreciate that, and you're right. I try not to think about it to that degree, but but it is what it is. Before I get into that, I just want to briefly comment on what you were saying before about people um, that 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 were able-bodied that that became disabled at some point in life. I was born with spina bifida, and I'll get into that in a second. And it's a very different psychology, and it's important to make that distinction. I think when you're born with a disability, as opposed to having had the ability and then losing it. I don't pretend to know what that's like, and other way around. No one else should be able to do that either, because it's a very very different psychology in terms of living with your disability. That being said, I was born. I'm 47 years old. I was born with spina bifida here in Connecticut, and I'm very lucky. Spina bifida essentially translates to hole in the spine. And typically, with that disability, wherever the hole in your spine is, you're usually paralyzed from that location down. And in my case, the hole in my spine is very, very low, and I happen to only be paralyzed from the knees down. So I do not have full leg paralysis. And so to that degree, I consider myself very, very lucky. And what my parents quickly learned as I was growing up was that my disability did not impact me mentally or cognitively. And they made the very conscious decision that based on that, I would be mainstreamed through the West Hartford public school systems. And to this day, I'm grateful that they made that decision, because that's life altering, right? Do you have them go through a regular school system, or do you do something else? And the first school, and so they worked with the school system to make sure that I could attend, and everyone made it happen. But the first school that I went to was a Catholic school here in town that uh, didn't didn't have any elevators, and so I was carried around from location, and I also didn't have a wheelchair yet at that time. I was carried around by the eighth grade boys in the school from location to location, and experiences like that at that time, and because the administration and the teachers weren't really equipped for that, it became very isolating. So I was sort of looked at freakishly, and very very different, and a lot of the kids that were there didn't know how to interact with me. That school's idea of me participating in recess was bringing out my desk chair out to the playground, having me sit in it, and basically watching other kids play. And I have a very visceral memory of one of my classmates coming up to me with Matchbox cars and wanting to play with me. And I got out of my chair and just got physically on the ground with him to play with his Matchbox cars, and I got in trouble for it. I was not supposed to get out of that chair. That was very. They were so concerned about my safety that, like, I could. It was almost further paralyzing, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so that didn't really change that experience. I was at that school till fourth grade. In fifth grade, I transferred to a school that had an elevator. I had a wheelchair by that point, and I was able to sort of come out of my shell a little bit, gain some friendships, and so on and so forth. Still had some very negative and isolating experiences from some teachers there, particularly with respect to things like physical education. They didn't know how to deal with me. But also around that time, I had become a March of Dimes poster child, which allowed me to experience many great things. I got to participate in sports because of some of those connections. One of those connections being Ivan Lendl, who's a former number one player in the world, tennis player in the world. It was through our connection with him that my mother was able to start a wheelchair sports camp here in Connecticut, which was the first of its kind in the history of, I believe, the entire Eastern Seaboard. And she ran that camp entirely on her own for 5 years before turning it over to a rehab hospital here in Connecticut. So what a great experience that was. And I played Little League Baseball here in Connecticut. I was the first kid in a wheelchair to play Little League Baseball in the history of the state. Another great, another trailblazing thing that I did, and a great experience that opened up, so many doors, did wonders for my self confidence. And then by the time I got to high school, and I apologize if I'm rambling, but I'm trying to get out as
No,
much as
no,
I
you
can here
go. You're good. You're good. You're good.
for your questions. When I got to high school, I had been playing tennis for a few years. I had played in a national wheelchair tennis tournament out in California that I had won. I had won both the singles and doubles title for my division. And when I got to my high school, I said, you know what? I want to try out for my high school tennis team. And just as a foundation, the only difference in the rules between wheelchair tennis and regular tennis is that I get two bounces. All the other
Mm.
rules are the same, which is great because I can go out and play with any of my able-bodied friends, and I'm allowed their two bounces. They get their one. We can play. It's great. So when I got to my first high school, because I transferred after my sophomore year, I approached the tennis coach and I said I want to try out for the tennis team. Now, mind you, the high school that I was attending had the best high school team in the state, had won
Mm.
several consecutive state championships, and had this undefeated streak that was historic. And this Jim Solomon is his name. I will always mention his name because he's turned out to be a dear, dear friend. He listened to me and he went to the state athletic commission or board, whatever it is, and he said, "I want to see what I can do to make this happen." And he told them this is the only difference in the rules. And he said, "Okay, I'm going to let him try out." He came back and he let me try out. Now that's the good news. The bad news was I tried out. I lost all three of my tryout matches to other players, which it happens. And Jim made the very difficult decision to cut me. And so I came back my sophomore year. But what he did is he said, I'm going to back up a second. What he did is he said, I'm going to cut you, but I want you to be the scorekeeper for our team, and I want you to come out every match, and I want you to warm up the guys. I want you to still be a part of the team. He didn't want to cut me and have that be the end of it. He's such
Mhm.
a deeply compassionate man. And the following year, so I did that. I was the scorekeeper, and I was there for the home matches anyway. And the following year, I went and tried out again. And Jim said, "Listen, this is what I'm going to do this year. Cutting you was the hardest cut I've ever had to make, and I never want to feel that way again. I'm instituting a no cut policy, and we're going to have a junior varsity team this year, and it's because of cutting you last year." And I was so deeply touched and honored. I made the JV team that year. Jim and then I played in the next high school. I played on that tennis team. It was a much smaller school. Tennis team wasn't nearly as competitive. I was a co-captain by my senior year, which was fantastic. Years later, in 2011, I want to say, so almost 20 years later, um, 2010 maybe, Jim Solomon was honored by the United States Tennis Association for his no cut policy. He was given an
Mhm.
award. I got a phone call from Jim, and he said, "I want you to be a part of this." And he's very humble. He's humble to a fault. He doesn't want accolades and recognition. He's very, very funny that way. He said, "I want you to come and be a part of this." And when somebody has impacted your life like that, all you want to do is have an opportunity to give back.
Mhm.
I got that opportunity to be a part of that video, and it's a 3-minute video. You can still find it on YouTube. It was an honor and a pleasure to be a part of that. After that, Jim began to invite me every year for our annual match with our crosstown high school rival. And he said, "I want you to just come and give a few words of wisdom and inspiration. Just talk to the guys and, you know, get everybody up." And it was both teams. I would talk to both teams.
Mhm.
And I've continued to do that to this day. COVID, we had a break during COVID, obviously, but Jim invites me every year to be a part of that match. And this year, Jim celebrated 50 years as a coach, and there were ceremonies in his honor. And once again, I got articles were written about him, and once again, I got that call, "John, will you be a part of this?" And he's like, "I'm so uncomfortable. Enough already. I don't want all this attention." And I said to him, "Jim, soak it up. It's 50 years." And
Yeah.
and you know, and I told him, "Don't," because I know how he is. Don't think about the tennis. Think of the impact that you've had on these kids' lives as a person. You've been a second father to countless kids, and some of them maybe even their first father, right?
Yeah.
Because of who you are and what you've done. And anyway, so I went to college down in North Carolina after high school. I met my wife. We've been married. We've been married. It'll be 20 years next year. We have a 5.5, almost 6 year old beautiful daughter, who is just a joy. And we met in college. We lived in Florida together for 10 years. Got married down there. Got the opportunity to move back up here, um, during a period of time where my brother served as the mayor of our town. He was the youngest serving and longest serving mayor of our town. My parents lived in Florida. They moved back up here, so we lived with them briefly. I worked for a college up here in their admissions department for a while, and then I got the great honor to serve as the governor's liaison to the disability community under our state's previous governor, which was a first of its kind role, cabinet level position that he created, that I made my own. I got a blank sheet of paper as my job description, and I was able to do the things that I wanted, and it was really my first work in disability advocacy and disability rights work, and focusing on areas, things like employment, things like housing, transportation, education, all the things that able-bodied people in many ways take for granted.
Mhm.
The roadmap is there for them. They can just follow it. Well, that's not the case for a lot of folks in the disability community, and I've been able to, in many ways, continue that work to today. So a long answer to your question, but
No,
I hope that's I
a
hope that's
great
what you
a
need.
great answer. Yes, 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 yes. A great answer nonetheless. And so I want to go back. Uh,
Yes,
I want to go back because I did ask you this question before we started recording, and I totally forgot about it. But you mentioned you are a girl dad, right? And so
I am.
definitely being a girl
I
dad
am.
myself,
Yep.
I gotta ask you the same two questions I ask everybody else. What does it mean to you to be a girl dad, and what is something that your daughter has taught you?
I, I have a I don't know the proper way to answer that, so I'll do my best. I have obviously the deepest love and all the feelings for my daughter. We had her through IVF, and we had to get a donor because of my disability. And I remember going through that process, and we sat. Part of that process was we had to sit down with a psychiatrist just for some evaluation,
Hmm.
and we talked about we hadn't decided on a donor yet at that point. And I, in the early part of our conversation, referred to the donor as the father. And I said, well, we haven't picked out the father yet. And the psychiatrist stopped me, and she said, you need to stop. She said, you haven't picked out the donor yet. You're the father. Don't ever say that again. And I remember, and I had conversations with my wife during her pregnancy. It's like, am I going to feel some sense of, not, of separation or distance and removal because I'm not the biological father? And that kind of thinking is in your head almost the whole time during the pregnancy. And the minute she was born, all of that goes away, Ernest.
Hmm. Yeah.
And there's none of that. There's none of that. Um, and what it means to me, it means so much, because I feel, maybe selfishly, that being a father with a disability, I get to teach her about things related to disability and things about like inclusion and equality, just inherently by being there and be as her
Hmm.
father. She's going to see the wheelchair and not know any different, right?
Yeah.
And what a powerful lesson to be able to teach her. And I see that, and she's taught me so much about your dad. You're not a guy in a wheelchair. You're not even dad in a wheelchair. She listen, when she can, she'll use the wheelchair as a toy. She'll push me around in a very joking and kidding fashion. She will. There. What I love is things like, Ernest. I'll be in a chair in the living room, right, and the wheelchair will be next to me, and she'll say, "Daddy, I need some. Can you get me something to drink from the fridge?" And as soon as she says it, she'll hop in the wheelchair and roll away. It's a joke. Like, she's like, "Yeah, I want you to go get me milk, but you don't have your chair. Like, come chase me.
Right.
Come get
Yeah.
me." There's no the wheelchair doesn't matter in her eyes. and
Hmm.
and to try to get her to even think about the fact that daddy can't walk her, it's like it doesn't matter to her, it doesn't phase her. And you ask about what I've learned from her. You learn from kids at a very young age the very definition of judgment free, because you can come home from the hardest, worst day at work. You can come home from having a horrible experience, whatever it was, and you come home and your daughter or your son, whoever it is, but in this case, we're talking about daughters, they're
Hmm.
just happy to see you.
Right.
And everything that happened to you that day just melts away in a second. And I know it could sound cliche, but there's no judgment in their eyes, right? They're just happy to see you. They're full of love. They're excited to see you. That's what she's taught me. She's taught me about what really is important, what really matters,
Yeah.
and one of the things that really should matter to people is being judgment free.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Man, to my listeners, we're definitely gonna have John on the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, and where we'll really be able to dive deeper into the girl dad experience and his experience as a father. And I can't wait for that. So whenever
Mhm.
you guys finish listening to this, go to YouTube, go to the Deal to the Hill podcasting network channel and see if that we've recorded that one because it's coming, right? So by the time this come out, maybe that episode will be out too, and you can watch both of them back to back. I love it. So John, I wanna go back to one more thing
Mhm.
because you told us your story up until a certain point,
Mhm.
but what I want to know now is what was the thing that pressed you to say, okay, now I'm going to start Inspired University, right? Because definitely you were a trailblazer. Definitely you were having all this
Mhm.
personal success in your life. But it's different, right? Is one thing
Right.
to be a person you accomplish things and you're feeling good about you,
Mhm.
but there is a thing that happens to some of us that says, okay, yeah, that was good for me, but what about everybody else? And so then those of us who are, have that heart or have that mission and find our purpose in helping others, we can't
Sure.
we can't feel we don't feel fulfilled with just our success in our areas.
That's it.
It's like if
That's
I if,
it.
if I can't bring somebody else along and do something for somebody else, then I'm
Mm.
really not successful in my own eyes. And
Right.
so
Right.
what was the thing for you that transpired that made you say, okay, now's the time. Now's the time for me to start, Inspire University and press forward.
So when my brother and I were growing up, because of the things that I was doing, Scott lived. My brother's name's Scott. He kind of, in a way, and he's 3 years older than me. Lived in my shadow as kids, and that was hard at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when as we went off and both went to college, and he went to law school, and then he came back to Connecticut before I did, and then of course his great political success, he becomes the mayor and so forth. So when I came back, that role was reversed, and now it was, oh, you're Scott's brother, right? And we both kind of looked at that, and because neither of us have ever been, competitive with each other in that sense. We've always been cheerleaders for the other one. But that was just an interesting dynamic shift, right? I come back and it's like, oh, you're everybody. By that point now, everybody knows who Scott is. He's the mayor. He's very well known. He's very well liked and popular. And oh, so you're Scott's brother? Yes, I am. And that was kind of cool for me. Like, I actually loved it. I'm like, you know. And then I think because of time and distance, having been away from West Hartford for a while, and coming back as an adult, and people seeing me, and seeing that I'm married, and all that, and I have a career. I mean, I didn't love what I was doing, but I was working. So in many
Mm-hmm.
ways, a success story, if you will, especially in the eyes of the disability community. I had a lot of friends and uh, independently sort of say to me, you've got a great story. You should think about, you know, writing it, or speaking about it, being inspirational. And I've always been very comfortable in interviews and public speaking. And and my mom, as I said, does the wheelchair camp, and we still go back every year to observe it and see it for a day. But when the media shows up, mom always says, you go talk to them. She doesn't want to do it. She's like, John, you're comfortable, you go do it, right? So I've always been comfortable public speaking and doing all of that. And so the idea started to sort of germinate. And then when I um, before I got the job in the governor's office, I spoke to a dear friend who's a mentor to both me and my brother in many ways, and he's in the political world. And I said, "Listen, Kevin, I've been doing the call center thing for, at that point, 13 years. I said, I want to do something that's bigger than me. I need to do something that's bigger than me. This isn't enough for me." And I think you just reached, to your point, you reach that point in life, right? That you just wake up and you say, I got to do something that's bigger than me. And that's what led to the job in the governor's office. And right around that time, I started to conceptualize this idea. The sad part is not having a lot of money to invest into it. It just took
Mhm.
a lot of time to get off the ground. I had to learn how to build my own website. I had to learn
Yeah.
how to do a lot of things on my own that I couldn't necessarily, pay people for. And don't get me wrong, I've gotten a lot of help and a lot of, charity from wonderful people, family and friends alike. But I had to do a lot of that stuff on my own and learn. And so that's kind of where the idea germinated from, and I finally just pulled the plug, or not pulled the plug, but I finally just uh, pressed the gas pedal to the floor at the beginning of this year, and I'm like, okay, my website's done. I'm out there. I'm doing this.
Right.
That's it. That's it.
I love it. I love it. So long story short, that's how we got here, right?
Right.
so
Right.
so I wanna talk about a couple things. Because we talked about I want to first of all let me start here. I want to talk about disability inclusion,
Sure.
right? And so
Right.
you mentioned a big part of your story was the story of the um your coach with the tennis
Hmm.
for the tennis matches,
Right.
and how he changed the whole situation, just by making sure, number one, even though he had to cut you that first year, still being like, okay, but I still want you around. I still want to
Right.
include you in what we have going
Right.
on here. And I think that's very important with a lot of people with disabilities, because a lot of times we I ain't gonna say we, but a lot of time people look at the disability, okay, of looking at what you can't do,
Right.
right? And they
Right.
never take the time to really look at what you can do. And it's like, okay, I can have a job, what I mean? I can function, I
Right.
can be mobile on my own. There's plenty of things that I can do. The only thing I can't do necessarily in this case is walk on my own. You know
Right.
what I mean? That's one
Right.
thing out of millions of things of abilities that I have, but oftentimes people can't get past the disability in order to see that. And
Correct.
so, in the work that you do now, how important is it, um, and what are some of the things that you help to put in place, even in your own hometown, that really addresses, the theme of disability inclusion, and really make sure, like, all right, we're really looking at people for what they can do, and making sure they have the opportunities to do what they can, and not
Mhm.
looking at them for what they can't.
I think it's at the heart of what I do every day. I think it's at the heart of how I operate, and um, I think the things that I accomplished in town may have led to certain developments in the town. I can't necessarily say that specifically. I think the creation of the ADA was a huge step, and that I grew up and lived here in a pre-ADA society, so people weren't looking at the disability community in the same way at that time as they started to in the 90s, and they certainly do today. I look at things now, and I think of things like unified sports, where kids with disabilities play sports with able-bodied kids. That didn't
Mhm.
exist when I was, and the integration of schools. You see far more kids with disabilities integrated in school systems. That wasn't that wasn't the case when I was growing up. I was it,
Yeah.
and I was it. I was it. I would have been entirely it for my entire academic career through high school, if there hadn't been one, there was a kid when I was in seventh grade in my class who was paralyzed in a skiing accident, and it was interesting that he was treated differently than I was when he eventually came back, and that was interesting to observe. And I felt like that was the case from the students and the teachers. They treated him differently, and I don't know why. I don't fault him for that, but um,
Mhm.
I think disability inclusion is just the essential way that people need to operate. We think about, there's a concept out there, I think about it all the time, called universal design, which is a way to design houses and office buildings. And, if you design things with a disability, with a disability community in mind, then you're designing it for everyone, right?
Mhm.
If you build a ramp, everyone can use it. If you build stairs, not everybody can, right?
Right.
And it's that kind of universal thinking, and people talk about accommodations and accommodations especially, and or special considerations, or this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking, but if you just design things differently from the get-go,
Mhm.
then the disability community wouldn't have to essentially beg for the things that they need.
Right.
I go back. COVID's a great example, Ernest, right? What happened as a result of COVID? Everyone had to start working from home, and it was almost like flipping a switch. It magically was able to happen. Well, do you know how many people are, and I don't have a number, but there is a significant number of people with disabilities that can't go to an office building for one reason or
Mhm.
another. But if you gave them the opportunity to work from home, they could. And that's not excluding them. That's saying, well, what can we do to make this work? What is your
Right.
ability? Well, if I have a computer set up at my house, I can work from home for you. Oh, okay. So I remember reading, and a lot of people, and I saw locally here, would read articles about, this is amazing how technology and it just, it changed the world. People were able to work from home almost instantaneously. And people in the disability community were saying, we've been begging for that kind of stuff for years.
Mhm. Yeah.
But when it impacted the entire world, it flipped like a switch. I'm going to give you one statistic, Ernest. In the United States alone, there are 50 plus million Americans that are reported to have a disability. 50 plus million. We are
Mm.
the largest, and it's not a minority because of the size of the number. We are the largest community in the world, the disability community. Why? Well, one, there's a large number of people that don't report they have a disability. So let's just
Mhm.
consider that number alone. But two, disability is everywhere. It spans all races, all cultures, all sexual identities, sexual preferences. It's everywhere. Anyone can have it. Anyone can become disabled at any time, right? It's a huge, huge number. And once people begin to grasp that and respect the reality of that number, maybe you'll start to see some dynamic shifts in how people operate and how people design things and how people think about things, with whether it's in their personal lives or in their business. It's a huge, huge community.
Yeah. Yeah. And
You've
I,
got to be inclusive.
yeah, and and it makes such a difference. And I'm thinking about two things that you mentioned. Um, you mentioned the treatment of the other student who wasn't born paralyzed but ended up getting paralyzed
Hmm.
later on, and you also mentioned earlier in the episode that there's a different mindset or different mentality when you've had a ability and it is taken away.
Right.
And I think that even goes to what you were saying, because I remember again being in the space where, as a caregiver to people with disabilities, before I started taking care of the two brothers, I had another client that I took care of, who had became disability, who had a stroke and
Hmm.
lost his ability to walk, and just his um communication and involvement with his family, because he was an adult, and but just how his own family related to him, you know what I mean, was
Hmm.
different, and how they treated him differently than they did before, he was able, wasn't able to walk. And unfortunately, there were many days I had to console him, because he's like, the things that they used to do. And I don't want to get too deep into it,
Hmm.
but they had a lake house, right? And
Hmm.
he used to always go to the lake house with them. Well, after he lost his mobility, they stopped taking him, but they still would come to see him before they went. You know what I mean? So they would come and
Hmm.
see him and be like, "Hey, how you doing?" And yeah, okay, well, we about to go to the lake house. And he's like, "I want to go." You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And they were like,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, we can't take you." You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so just a whole different mindset of how sometimes even in our own families we're looked at, or people are looked at differently, when when a disability comes, is comes to the forefront, should I
Right.
say,
Right.
but it doesn't take away your ability, right? And so that brings me to the second thing, what we were saying. I
Hmm.
had a guest on, I think her first name was Alma Thomas, I think that was her name. But I had her on this podcast not too long ago. You guys, my listeners, definitely go check out that episode. But she has been bedridden for several years now due to having a stroke. I think she
Hmm.
has several strokes, and so she's been bedridden for years now.
Hmm.
But she's a speaker. She's a motivational speaker from her bed, and she's written a whole book from her cell phone. Like, she literally typed out one letter at a time and wrote a whole book. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? And so it's like the things, like you said, the when we're able to look past the disability and look at a person for what they can do, the abilities that they have, the
Right.
reality is there's numerous things that we have the ability to do. You know what I mean? When
Yep.
we just open up our eyes to be able to see it. And
Yeah.
so definitely wanted to point that out. I
Hmm.
wanted to talk about one more thing before we got to here, John, and we
Hmm.
talked about it a little bit. Um, and this idea of going from disability awareness
Hmm.
to disability in action,
Right.
right? And because I mentioned to you, I think we weren't, I don't think we were recording then, but just the idea of coming to places, with my friends and my clients who were wheelchair bound, and it's like, oh, there's a wheelchair accessible parking space, and so we park there, but then there's no ramps. You know what I mean?
Right.
To get
Right.
into the place,
Right.
it's like, hey,
Yep.
what, you stopped at the parking lot. Like, where's the rest of it? You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Where's the
Right.
rest of the consideration? Like you said earlier, you're like, okay,
Hmm.
somebody thought about it, but then it didn't equate into the rest of the design of the building.
Right.
And so you talk about a lot about, just getting from this place of awareness, like, okay, good, we're all aware now, but now let's put
Right.
it to things in action. So tell us a little bit
Right.
more about that.
Right. So, again, we there's, you see them on the calendar all the time, right? Awareness for the, this is this awareness day, awareness day, awareness day. Great. We've had those for decades now, right? Now it,
Mhm.
and now we're in a time where we hear conversations about, well, how can I be an ally? How can I be an ally? How can I be an
Mhm.
ally? Right. Well, how you can be an ally is, first, you engage the disability community, your friends, your family, whatever it is. You engage them in the conversation. That's the primary thing that you do, because you're not going to figure out solutions on your own to their situations. Every disability is unique. Everybody's lived experience with their disability is unique. One person with spina bifida lives very differently than the next person with spina bifida, right? You've got to bring them into the conversation, and then that's how you problem solve, and that's how you get to solutions, and then that's what leads to action. There's a phrase that the disability community uses as almost like a rallying cry, which is nothing about us without us. don't
Mm.
don't make any decisions
Right
about
there.
us unless we're there at the table, and anything less is unacceptable. So you need to bring them into the conversation, let them be a collaborative part of the solutions, and then get there together. It's the only way that it's the best way, in my opinion, to um, to pursue disability action and lead to solutions and lead to better lives for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. I love that saying, nothing about us without us. I
Hmm.
think that is so awesome. Cool, cool.
Not
So
mine.
John, I want to say, you said it's not yours.
Not yours, not mine.
Oh. I wanna thank you, John, for
Mhm.
coming on. First of all, for being a guest here on the podcast and sharing your story. I definitely learned some things from you, and I'm really encouraged again with especially being around persons with disabilities, being a caregiver, being a
Mhm.
friend. You know what I mean? I've seen how you know the different spaces, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm so
Yeah,
glad that you've taken the fortitude to press forward and to make a difference for all of us. Again, because like you said, when you do something for the disability community, is really making it for everyone because
right.
we're all ever able to benefit from it. So I definitely appreciate you. I want you to have the last word, and I want you to leave us with a word of inspiration, motivation, however you feel. Um, and I wanted you to give us your leave us with your social media handles and things of that nature, website and all of that, where we can find you at and find out how to connect with you for those who
Mhm.
may want to work with you. So I'll give you a couple minutes to think about that. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you like this podcast and you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, then get your copy of the Start Your Podcast Now ebook, right? So that ebook is available at ebooksbyejames.com. It is an ebook that I wrote because I've been asked several times, how do I start a podcast? So I just wrote an ebook to make it simple for everybody, right? And so if you're thinking about starting your own podcast, again, get your copy of the Start Your Podcast Now ebook available at ebooksbyejames.com. Also, make sure you guys go and check out my main website, which is the dealhealfulfill.org. Again, that's dealhealfulfill.org, because my mission, as well as the mission of the podcast, is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. So you guys can go there and find out more about the things that I have going on, and everything about my workshops and things of that nature, and also be able to book me to come out to be a speaker or a workshop facilitator at your school or your event. Also, make sure you guys go to ebooksbyejames.com. Again, you can find the podcast ebook there, but you also can find other ebooks that I have written that's also available there, including the Core Four, which is the core four values that every daughter should get from her father, which is one of the ebooks that we use and we talk about on the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. So you guys want to make sure you tap into that resource. Again, all of those ebooks are found at ebooksbyejames.com. Make sure you guys go there and check that out. Also, check out our inspirational t-shirt line, including our t-shirt podcast merch. You go to Deal to Heal Tees. That's Deal, the number two, healtees.com. Deal to Heal tees.com, which is our inspirational t-shirt line. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline. Make sure you guys go there and check out our inspirational tees, as well as our t-shirts with our podcast logos on it. So we have a t-shirt with the Deal to Heal logo on it, and also one with the Girl Dad Discussions logo on it as well. So make sure you guys go and check that out. Last but not least, over the last couple of years, I've been blessed to be a part of an organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And what we do, we have free virtual workshops every other month, excuse me. We originally started having them every quarter, and then we moved them to every other month. We have a free virtual workshop that you can take on your phone or on your laptop, talking about everything surrounding forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of the world, who is forgiveness for, what does it mean to forgive, just everything regarding forgiveness. The workshop is absolutely free, but the information is priceless. Whenever you guys are listening to this podcast, either one just ended or one is coming up. So you can go to forgivenessmission.com in order to sign up for our next free virtual workshop, or just go to Eventbrite and look up Forgiveness Workshop held by the Forgiveness Mission, and you guys will be able to find that there. So yeah, make sure you guys go and check out those things. Also, there's so much other information that's available in the descriptions of the podcast, including podcast equipment and stuff. Some of the things, the mics and cameras and all those things that I use is also in the descriptions, and so much other stuff. So when you finish watching or listening to the episode, go to the descriptions and see all the gems that we have there loaded there. And again, there's a lot of information just in the description itself, so make sure you guys check that out. So Jon, once again, I want to say thank you so very much for being on. Thank you for being a guest. I really appreciate having you. I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Ernest, and it's been, again, an honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight. Deeply appreciate your time. True inclusion can't happen without collaboration and conversation. That's where it starts first. And so if you want to be inclusive, you need to be collaborative, and you need to have conversations with the people you want to include. And I encourage you to do that with everybody to the highest degree possible.
All right. Where's your social media handles and your website so we can follow you?
Right. So I go back and forth with how I do I use my name. So my website is just jonslifka.com, JONS as in Sam, LIF as in Frank, KA.com. My Instagram is at InspireUJS, so it's INSPIREUJS. And then you can find me on X or Twitter or whatever Mr. Musk is calling it these days, at Jonathan Slifka. And then also you can find me on LinkedIn at Jonathan Slifka. I have two profiles on pretty much all of them, but either one will point you to the other one, and I'm happy to friend anybody that requests it. And certainly, if you're looking for an inspirational and motivational speaker with a disability component, reach out to me. I'm your guy. I'm happy to help out.
All right. We can't end it no better than that. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.